You just graduated college, and it's a momentous occasion for both you, your friends, and your family. So to celebrate this, you go on down to Vegas to, bet a little money. You're feeling lucky, you just graduated. So you hop on a plane and fly on down to Vegas with $300 in your back pocket that you're going to try and make materialize into like $10,000 or more. So you go down to Vegas and you're gambling, but unfortunately you lose all your money. So as you're sitting there in the Tiki Lounge after your excursion in Vegas, you ask yourself this simple question: why couldn't I stop gambling? And what is it about gambling that makes it so addictive to certain types of people? Well, you know what? Let's talk about the science behind that.
Welcome to The Science Behind That with Atticus Hamilton.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on back to The Science Behind That podcast. I am your host, Atticus Hamilton, and as you heard from the intro today, we are going to be talking about the science behind gambling addiction. Very weird science here. Very interesting as well. And, when I was thinking about this episode, I was actually scrolling through the trending section on YouTube. For those of you who don't know, that is how I get a lot of my ideas. I go to YouTube or Instagram or that terrible app Twitter, and I scroll through the trending section and try and see, what sort of things everybody's talking about. And I remember on YouTube, one of the big things were videos from this one female creator. I'm not going to say her name because, I don't want to ruin her business model or whatever. But she was posting all these videos that some would say, everyone would say, are get-rich-quick schemes. And, there was one of them, it was called, I paid $0 for this laundromat and made $64,000 a year. There were others that were these 3 things you can do to get rich now. It was all these get rich quick videos, and I hate those videos because I think they take advantage of people who are down on their luck. I don't like those videos, but it got me thinking about addiction. And it got me thinking about gambling, because if you're on YouTube and you're, scrolling through YouTube, or you're looking for get-rich-quick schemes, it's essentially gambling, isn't it? Because you start doing all these things, and then when they don't work out, you're like, well, maybe I just didn't do it right. Maybe I need to do it this way instead. And you end up losing more money than you actually get in return. And that got me thinking about what the science is behind gambling addiction. And spoiler alert, it's pretty similar to drug use or food cravings or any other type of addiction you could think of. Really, in essence, it's pretty much the same. Now, one other fun thing I did was I also went to Google. See, this is how all great stories start. I went to Google and I looked up what is the science of gambling addiction, and every single article, whether it was from Mayo Clinic or Scientific American, every single article, if it was in a platform that's not for scientists, they all said the same thing: gambling triggers the reward pathway in the brain. But there was never any actual description on what this reward pathway is. And that really, really irritated me. So today, we're going to finally explain what that reward pathway is, what regions of the brain are affected, and how that relates to a gambling addiction. So to start off, there are a couple different regions of the brain that we need to talk about here. The first one is called the nucleus accumbens. And so the nucleus accumbens, they're 2 very small pieces of brain tissue that are buried within the lower portion of the brain. And they are heavily involved in reward. Now, what do I mean by that? They're involved in dopamine secretion. So the nucleus accumbens is vital for the actual reward aspect, the dopamine or the oxytocin or the serotonin that's released as a result of an addictive behavior. And then you have the orbitofrontal cortex, and that's in the very front of the brain, as the name suggests. And that is involved in motivation. And that's involved in motivation for many different things, not just in addiction. And then we have the amygdala and the hippocampus. And for the purposes of this episode, because both of these brain structures do end up doing a lot, but for the purpose of this episode, all that you need to know is that they're involved in memory, remembering that behavior, that's the amygdala, and then cognitive control of that behavior, and that's the hippocampus. And finally, we have the prefrontal cortex and cingulate gyrus, which is also involved in the cognitive control aspect of addiction. So starting off here, so let's say you go to Vegas, right? You go to Vegas, you sit down at a blackjack table and you bet $100 and you lose. And then you bet another 100 and you win. Yay! So when you win, that moment when you win, your nucleus accumbens starts secreting dopamine to reward your brain, to tell you, hey, this is a good thing. We're excited. Everybody knows that feeling of excitement that you get when you win something. It's a good feeling, and it's a good feeling because of dopamine. So then you keep going. You win a little bit, then you lose big time. But you keep betting because you keep hoping to reach that same high that you were at when you won something. You keep hoping that you're going to win big. But a lot of people never do. And a lot of people destroy their lives because of gambling or get-rich-quick schemes. And that's why I don't like get-rich-quick schemes, and I don't really like things that promote gambling, especially to young audiences, because it's not a good thing. It's not a healthy lifestyle. That being said, there are definitely ways to beat games like blackjack, but that's for another episode. So let's go through this. So we know that the nucleus accumbens secreted dopamine when you won something. But why do you keep betting? And the reason for that is because that moment when you won, your nucleus accumbens secreted dopamine, which activated the orbitofrontal cortex. Remember, that was motivation. So then you're motivated to keep going because you're consciously thinking to yourself, well, if I keep betting, I have to win eventually, right? Because I won before, so I have to win eventually. And, it feels good to win. And your amygdala and hippocampus are going to keep record of what it felt like to win. That's where the memory comes involved. It comes into play. So when I said there, we all know what it feels like to win something big. We do. We all know what that feels like. It's a great feeling, and we remember that feeling because of the action of the amygdala and the hippocampus. And then that cognitive control, the prefrontal cortex and the cingulate gyrus, those two structures are going to kind of function with the orbitofrontal cortex together to perpetuate that behavior, to continue the betting in a quest to win again. So consciously, you're thinking, man, I really want to win because I want money. But from a subconscious perspective, your brain is thinking, I really want to win because I really want to get more dopamine. That's what's happening here, is it's that dopamine. Because if winning didn't cause a dopamine release, gambling would not be addictive. So that's what's happening here. So to summarize then, so your nucleus accumbens secretes dopamine at either the thought of winning money or the action of winning money. And that activates the orbitofrontal cortex to motivate you to continue this behavior. And the amygdala and hippocampus remember that feeling, that dopamine. It remembers how excited you are with money. And then your cognitive controls your prefrontal cortex. And there will be a point where your prefrontal cortex and your cingulate gyrus kind of get out of this sort of haze of dopamine, and they step in and they're like, look, bro, you've burned like, $400 on the blackjack table here. You haven't won anything. Maybe it's time to stop. And for any of you out there who have gambled and have lost big time, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because there comes that point where usually it's at the end of the night and you're like, oh my God, what did I just do? That's when the reality of what just happened is kicking in. So how does this compare with other things? Well, the interesting thing is actually pretty similar. A gambling addiction is actually pretty similar to addiction to any sort of drug because they use the same pathway. It's just a little bit different. So take cocaine, for example. Cocaine directly activates the nucleus accumbens to produce dopamine. And the motivation there is dopamine makes you feel good. So the motivation there is you want to feel good again. So in the instance of cocaine, there's no, monetary motivation. It's not money that's causing the nucleus accumbens to be activated. It's the drug itself. And it's as addictive as gambling. And why is that? Well, the reason why I personally think that is more than just that both of these behaviors or substances result in the same addiction pathway. I think the bigger thing here is in our society, money is a necessity, right? It really is. For a vast majority of people, for the vast majority of people, money is a necessity. You need to have money to survive in today's society. Unless you're living completely off the grid, you need money to survive. And so money, because of that, has this intrinsic value that's on par with that of food. And we all know food is addictive, and food is addictive for the same reason, because it activates the reward pathway. It activates the nucleus accumbens, which produces dopamine, which motivates you to eat again, and on and so forth and so forth. So we know food is addictive, and I think that money is addictive for the exact same reason. It's not because of an evolutionary drive like with food. It's because we live in a society in which money is a necessity. And it's been drilled into us since a very young age that it's a necessity. And so as a result, our brains treat money in the same way that we treat food or water, that it can become addictive, or any other drug for that matter. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I will see you again on Monday, and on Monday it's going to be a fun episode. We're going to be talking about the science of why COVID can cause reinfections. So stay tuned for that episode. And ladies and gentlemen, in case you haven't checked it out already, go look in the description below this episode and follow that link to the science behind that on YouTube. I promise you won't be disappointed with the content over there. Ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic weekend. And until next time, stand up and question everything.